Ron Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm presenting some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literature and cultural studies. This particular installment is one of a group on William Shakespeare's play, The Merchant of Venice. Shakespeare used the city-state of Venice as a setting for two of his plays, The Merchant of Venice and Othello, the Moor of Venice. And what I'll be saying here about the social historical context of Venice in the 16th and 17th centuries is relevant for Othello as well as for The Merchant of Venice. In the early 17th century, Venice was an important center for maritime trade. City-states like Venice played an important role in the transition from the feudal economic order to the emerging system of mercantile capitalism. Mercantile capitalism required different economic, political, and legal arrangements from those that had been characteristic of the feudal economic order. Venice, situated on the Mediterranean Sea, represented a new site of economic power and consequently a new site of political power. In the earlier Middle Ages, wealth and political power was absolutely tied to the possession of land mass. And the way to increase one's power would be simply to appropriate larger territories of land, along with the peasants who lived on that land and the vassals who would fight for you and keep the peasants under control to either protect what you had gained in terms of control of territory or to expand your territory. But now, money capital was becoming the primary source of wealth rather than possession of land. In medieval Europe, most individuals were subjects of one aristocratic lord or another. But in modernity, increasingly, one would be born the citizen of a nation-state, a modern republic. In medieval Europe and in medieval culture, community relations are emphasized over individualism and personal freedom. But in modernity, the individual began to count for more than the community. In medieval Europe, kinship ties and obligations extended far beyond the limits of the nuclear family to include distant relatives, business relations, neighbors, servants, and others with whom the family had contacts and shared interests of one kind or another. But in modernity, along with the rise of individualism, increasingly the family came to be defined as the nuclear family, consisting of a man and a woman and their children. In medieval Europe, therefore, there was a much greater emphasis on social obligations and interdependence among members of the community. In modernity, by contrast, increasingly, the emphasis is on self-reliance and autonomy. And here are a few details that will crop up in various places in The Merchant of Venice. Venice doesn't have an aristocracy exactly. Venice has what they call doges, wealthy council members of the city. They're not part of the land-based European aristocracy because their power is based on accumulated capital and not on control of land, and it's not hereditary. That's a more republican system than is the feudal system with its kinship-based, family-based aristocracy. It becomes important in this play because in a place like Venice, you're encountering necessarily people from a variety of different cultures. In The Merchant of Venice, it's Shylock, the Jew, who can assert his rights, or at least try to assert his legal rights in Venice against a borrower who has not repaid his debt. And even a Jew in Venice can assert his rights according to the rule of law. I'm always struck by how Shakespeare, even at the very dawning of modernity, Shakespeare saw some cultural and social and political issues that would only become magnified as time went on. He already saw the tensions of class, race, and gender, for example. He saw the disruption that would be caused by this new economic and political system that was forming. And he deals with those issues in his plays in ways that I think are quite perceptive. An obvious source of dramatic conflict in the play is the conflict of religion between Shylock as a Jew and the Christians, including Antonio, the merchant of the title. But running through the play from beginning to end is the question of money. Antonio, the Christian merchant, is involved in international trade. The functioning of capitalism and international trade in Venice depends upon the rule of law. And yet when the values and practices of mercantile capitalism are put to the test, they invoke the traditional assumptions and expectations of behavior characteristic of the medieval pre-capitalist European society. In a subsequent webcast, I'll examine some of these tensions closely as they are represented in the relationships among the different characters as we look at the plot of Merchant of Venice. For now, I'll conclude this webcast. As always, if you have questions or comments, send me an email.